And welcome back to another episode of Code to Cloud. We are now heading into late January, early February of 2026. And I've got another buddy on from a conference that I attended last year in Winnipeg. Dev Prairie, I always get it wrong. Dev Prairie Con,
Prairie
Prairie
DevCon.
DevCon.
Yeah.
That's the second time I've done this on this show, right? Darcy's just going to be like, I'm going to send you a massive poster, right? That says, this is how you say it. But, I met a lot of good people there. And I met my buddy here, Craig Tataryn, right?
That's right.
And we got chatting. I said, hey, I got a podcast. Do you want to come on? And he was like, yeah. Didn't even know what he was getting himself into, right? So huge props for that. But Craig, do you want to tell people who you are, where you live, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah, sure. Yeah, we met at Prairie DevCon. I wasn't speaking that year. That was like fall of last year, right?
Right.
But the organizer Darcy, who we both know, he's such a mensch. He was lending me a projector, and he's like, "Well, I'm really busy. I'm flying out this day. Just come to the speaker dinner or speaker drinks, and I'll give it to you then." So, yeah, I got to talking to you. I got to talking to a few other people, and I think some that you've already had on the podcast. And yeah, I hit you up afterwards on your offer and kind of presented with, here's what we can do. And I'm really excited to be here, Kevin. So yeah, just a bit about myself. So I can't believe it, but I guess I have around 30 years of experience in software development. I was kind of that product of like the 70s, 80s type 90s type of career path where you go get your comp sci degree and then you go get a job at an insurance company and there you go, right? And so I did that, and I didn't go right into an insurance company right away. So I was really fortunate in that one of my friends from university got a job at a local place, and it was just such a great experience because I thought I was a hot shot, comp sci grad going in there, and it basically got my butt handed to me by the senior devs, right? They were on a different level, and I learned a ton. It's really fun. And then from there, I ended up going down to Minneapolis because in the early 2000s, late 90s, there was a brain drain in Canada where the U.S. just had this insatiable thirst for programmers. And I kind of looked at it like my friends went down there. I'm getting paid this much in Canadian. They're offering me this much in American, which really means this much in Canadian. So it was just like a no brainer. And Minneapolis to Winnipeg, that where I'm from, is really not that far. It's like a 45-minute plane ride kind of thing. So I did that, and it was a really good experience. And it actually kind of kick-started my journey as being like a remote developer because the company I was working for was called CompuWare, which is like a great kind of like 90s sounding company.
Love it.
Yeah. And they had a huge client. They actually had bought another company, and then I ended up working for them under that kind of umbrella. But they had a big client in New York, Morgan Stanley, which you probably know, right?
I've heard of those guys. Yes.
So at the time they were multinational, 50,000 employees at the time. They probably way more now. And they off-sited their development, part of their development to this company in Minneapolis, which I was working for. So it was great. We all were sitting in an office. It was cubicles, Dilbert type of setup. And yeah, after a while, I kind of got a little bit homesick, which only people that are born in Winnipeg probably want to go back. But life brought me back to Winnipeg, and I kind of I told Morgan Stanley, I said, yeah, I'm going back to Winnipeg. It was really great working with you guys. And they're like, whoa. But we actually don't know the difference between Minneapolis and Winnipeg. They might be the same thing. Like, why don't you just continue your work from your home? Great. Okay. So it was, you know, that's like early 2000s that I was doing that. So I was working from home since then, and I kind of never stopped. I did a few on-site clients here in Winnipeg, but um, from there, I basically, yeah, just worked for Morgan Stanley remotely through that company in Minneapolis. And
That's
yeah,
that's wild because I'm not going to go into the pros and cons of working remotely, but I'm definitely on the pro side of it. I don't know if it's like this to you, but I like the fact that they saw that they could just fix it. Like it was an easy fix for them, right? Like we want to keep up the development work. We've got projects to deliver. We've got value to add. And instead of putting up a big fight, right, about why they need to see you in the office every day, like as soon as you remove that problem, I just like concentrate on the work in hand rather than you know trust issues or
and
um
and that's the thing, like, you have to have a
yeah.
way to measure the output, right? So they were pretty happy with my output, which, is I mean, I admittedly, I do have, like, ADHD, and it's you gotta really concentrate on focusing your time, right? Like, especially in this day and age, like, there's just so many distractions, it's insane. So I do a mixture of things. I go to a co-working spot. I, uh, just, like, shut down any browsers or Twitter or anything like that, and I just focus on my work, kinda give those as rewards kinda thing. So it's been a journey for sure.
I'm glad you brought up the ADHD thing. Something I've got myself, and I used to work in those big open plan offices and 70 people hounding me at my desk. Teams going off every 5 minutes, right? That kind of thing, and I just found it really hard to like lock in, as the kids would say, right? And do my work. So
Yes.
I have a really minimalist environment at home where I can super focus, and even the notifications on my own laptop, right? It's down to a minimum, right? Because once I'm doing deep work, it's a good place to be, right? I get a lot done. But like to your point, still go downtown, right? You got to have those in-person connections. Sometimes it's just to break up the anatomy, right? Walk into the basement every day, right? To do your job, to do your job, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and even, like, in consulting, it can kinda get a little bit lonely because you're usually brought in, to fix a problem or work on a certain thing, and you're kinda you're part of the team, but not really, right? You're not an employee, you don't have the same kinda, like, investment there, and, that was one of the reasons, like, I kinda, like, from being a consultant, I, ended up, kinda starting my own venture. So I did like a startup of my own. I had an employee who ended up being a partner. That didn't, we at some point we just had to say we're not making money on this, so we got to shut it down. But it was an expensive lesson, but kind of learned a lot. And then I ended up, so I did that in like my 30s, and then kind of got into my 40s, went back to consulting, got into my 40s, and I was like, I want to. And this was after the pandemic where we couldn't even go outside, right? I'm just like I want to be part of something bigger here. Like I just want to make an impact somewhere and just have like colleagues. I don't know. It was a kind of a naive thing to think, but I ended up working or getting a job with an early-ish stage startup, a Canadian startup. I was the third developer in their Winnipeg office. They had a ton in Calgary, and I started working there, and it was they were very adamant, "You have to be on site. There's none of this remote working stuff. You need to be there. You need to be able to collaborate," and that kind of thing, and, so I went from fully remote to, "Okay, you're in an office, it's just gonna be 2 other people there. They're not on your project, but you gotta be in the office," right? So, um, it 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 took a bit of time to adjust, and again, like, open floor plan. Like, the person next to me was, like, literally right next to me. So, like, you're kinda, like, gonna almost have to like, those things that you put on horses, like, you gotta put, like, the binders on just so you don't get distracted.
I know exactly what you mean. I
Yeah.
really do.
But
Yeah.
I I made it fun. What I ended up doing was, I would bike to the office. I would walk to the office. It was about an hour to walk to it, but, in the winter, I would skate to the office because we have a huge, river trail system. I cross country skied to the office once. So I just like I tried to make it like fun, get some exercise in and go that path. Um,
Look, 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 hang on a minute, hang on a minute. You've just said the most Canadian things I have ever heard,
yeah.
right? So, well, just to spice up the commute in the morning, I thought I'd just skate down the riverbed, right? Like literally. So, this to our global listeners, right? This may sound wild, but this is
Mhm.
standard here, right? You have to get creative in the winter to
For
take
sure.
advantage of what's going on, right? Otherwise, you know,
Yeah, it gets mundane, and
yeah.
driving. It took me less time to bike home than it did to drive, right? So it was a no brainer in that respect. And I my next thing I wanted to do is I wanted to kayak. Never got to get that point because I never stayed. I wasn't at the startup long enough. And then when we all got our payday because they had like some big buyout or we went public, I was gonna like take a helicopter or something like that, but never got that far. So we're
So
yeah,
so you had 2 startups, right? You
yeah,
had one that was previous.
yeah.
Which can you say which the one what was previous? What was it doing or
Oh, the one that I started myself.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So what I did was I actually had a podcast back in like 2008. 2009, we got like decently big in the Java space.
Okay.
So we ended up like for instance interviewing Igor Minar, who's the Angular guy. Yeah, James Gosling, who's the father of Java. So we got pretty big. And when we interviewed James Gosling, we did it in San Francisco. We were at a conference there, and we kind of cornered him and said, "Hey, can we interview you?" He goes, "Yeah, meet me at this coffee shop in the Museum of Modern Art or something, and we'll chat there." So we got there, and it was like so noisy. It was like open space, just noisy. So we had all of our setup with our mics, and we were trying to make the best of it. But once I got the recording files, I'm like, this is really hard, right? So there was a publication that was there at that conference, and they're like, we heard that you interviewed Gosling, and this was like when he was doing his breakup with Oracle. So there were some spicy takes on
There
there.
was
And
there was really messy, right? Do you remember
uh,
that? It was on all the bulletin boards, right,
yeah,
globally. Yeah, yeah.
and he was wearing a shirt that had the 1984 like commercial, but it had like Larry Ellison's face on the big. So they were really interested in that, and they're like, "Hey, if we transcribe it for you, would you let us host it on our site so we can get the traffic?" And we're like, "Yeah, sure. We'll co-promote kind of thing." And that really showed me the value of transcribing audio. First of all, people will get to it because they can search in Google and they'll end up on that page that has the transcription. And I started looking at YouTube and I realized like how do people actually get people to YouTube? The only way they can get people to YouTube right now is if YouTube's algorithm kind of pumps them there. Well, I think that algorithm does work on if you upload transcription files, they'll index them, and then maybe the title of your talk like on your YouTube channel doesn't have anything to do with the Ford F-150, but you mention it a lot in your transcription. So maybe this would be some value and we'd get some SEO, and that would be kind of the value prop. So we created a system. It was called CrowdScriber. And what it would allow a content producer to do is they could leverage their fan base and basically get them to transcribe their content by splitting it up into little 5-minute chunks and then distributing out the chunks to all the fans, and then they could do their little part transcribing it, and then we stitch it all together. And we used at the time like Google's speech to text API. So we kind of give them like a head start, and then they would just go ahead and fix up all the problems with that because it really wasn't great at the time. Like it didn't do a great job. So you needed that human intervention in there. Um, we ended up getting one big content producer on YouTube. His channel is Paulo from Tokyo, and he's an American guy that lives in Tokyo. He's got a family there, and he does a lot of like day in the life type videos. So the day in the life of like a Japanese butcher, right? And he saw the value right away, and he's like, and I have international following. So, like, and we're like, yeah, so you can distribute out like a Taiwanese transcription link, get all those people to help you out. So he loved it, but we just couldn't figure out how to monetize it. So we kind of had to send our regrets to him. He was pretty sad about it, but we couldn't get anybody else to use it.
As a content creator myself, I've really struggled. Yeah, totally struggled. Like, I've tried different platforms, different solutions. Like, when you start a podcast, I think I've done about 3 of them, and then most of them have failed, right? This one seems to have stuck, right? Or I'm just, getting better as time goes by.
But you
But
probably you probably have people in Korea that would love to listen to
I
your
totally
podcast,
agree.
right?
I'm missing out on all that, and I know YouTube now is starting to translate my
Mhm.
dodgy British accent into different languages. I'd love to see how that looks, right? But it's you know, I think AI has accelerated a lot of that
It
though.
has. It has. And I
Totally.
actually had a friend when it was kind of like at the end ish of that startup. He said, AI is just going to do this all. And I said, well, it's not really that good. He goes, it's going to get better. I go, oh, I won't be able to translate things. It will be able to do it at some point. I'm like, there was something in the back of my mind going, you're right. You know, time to start going back to consulting and actually, paying the bills again.
Yeah, well, that's what happens, right? Everyone's mortgage needs paying. So yeah, so you went back to consulting,
Yes.
right? It's good to that good little tidbit there saying that you went to some Java conferences as well,
Hmm.
right? Yeah, it's got some background info. Um, so how long did you do consulting for? Like, what were you working on? Was you back into code, or were you like,
Well, yeah, I've always been into code, not a manager type at all. So yeah, a lot like I remember when I ended up going from consulting to joining that startup, the big like the hyperscale startup. They saw the gray hair and they're like, "You want to be an engineering manager?" Like, no, no, I want to code. I want to do some code. Okay, okay. Like, but they are always kind of like, "Hey, you should probably be a manager." And I'm like, just it's not for me. I mean, it's not for me. Not that it's like beneath me or anything like that. It's like I just don't think I would be great at it, right? Whereas with code, I know what to do. People are hard. Like code's easy. Like honestly, right?
yeah, totally. I've been a manager myself, and yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's different, right? It's a different wheelhouse. But yeah, with development or engineering, I don't know, like do what you love, right? As they say.
absolutely.
So
As long as you can do it, right? And with everything that's happened over the last 5 years with AI, you really got to keep yourself on the ball. You can't just like put your head in the sand. Like you got to figure out how to use these tools. It's becoming a skill, right? Like it's just another skill of yours, right? You don't have to like have it write all of your code, but you got to be able to navigate it and at least talk intelligently about it. So yeah, like when I went to so when again when I was in my mid 40s, kind of looking for like more collaboration and being part of something big, I ended up going to this startup. And it was a startup that like I knew was around, and there was a guy that like their CTO was heavily recruiting. They got like a bunch of money. Like it was, I don't know, like their first round of funding, like let's say was like 50 million US. So that goes pretty far in
in
Canada.
Canada, yeah, totally,
It
yeah.
gets quite a few resources. So I kind of asked him, I'm like, well, would you be interested in the consultant? No, no, you got to be an employee. Like, yeah, not really ready for that. Then probably about 6 or 7 months later, I started seeing their signage, their marketing around the city. And I started thinking, this company's actually seems to be doing okay. Maybe I should reapproach here. And I ended up signing on as an employee. Uh, I don't know if it was the best idea, but yeah. So yeah, so I ended up starting with them. And again, like I was like the third developer. Well, I guess two developers like myself and this other fellow got hired on the same day. So maybe we share that role. Um but it was really exciting. They were building. They were building fast. They had like a really good purpose, disrupt banking in Canada because it's basically ruled by the big five: RBC, CIBC, Scotiabank, TD, right? Um, and it was good. Like we were in Winnipeg and their headquarters is in Calgary, so we weren't like the at the epicenter, but they were trying to build that up in Winnipeg. So it was very exciting to be part of that. Um, and the thing that I didn't understand though was, you go in to get your offer, and it was kind of like not just, "Hey, Craig, we want to pay you this much," or "What are you looking for," or that kind of thing. It was like, "Okay, what are you looking for?" "Okay, well, we're going to give you options here." And by that, I mean like literal and
Stocks.
figuratively and literally. You can take like this amount of money, which if I would have brought that back to my spouse, she probably would have threw me right out of the house because we wouldn't have been able to live. But a lot of options, a lot of stock options, right? Um, or you can take the middle road. So it's kind of like the Goldilocks and the Three Bears, like too hot, too cold, just right. So then they say, well, okay, on the other end of the spectrum, we can give you something closer to what you need, with like a little bit of stock options. And then the middle one is like, we'll kind of give you like not what you need, but like enough for you to live, and then like a decent amount of stock options. And so I kind of, I was not familiar with this. I never worked for a startup before. So I decided to ask some questions. One of my questions was, okay, you're offering me this much stock options. What percentage of ownership is that? Oh, we can't really divulge that. No, sorry. Okay. Well, what's the strike price? Well, the strike price is this. Okay, what is it valued at right now? Like if I were to take that option, convert it to a share, what do you think that share is worth? Well, based on our current valuation, the share is worth this much, and we're giving it to you at a discount of this much. Like, and this gets into like, your listeners might not understand what an
What's a strike price?
yeah,
I've got all these questions here, Craig.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah, yeah.
because I maybe you'd be able to clarify some of this for us, right? But like when I see stuff and it's like preceding,
Hmm.
and then it's like private, right? Or then it's like Series A, Series B, Series C, and I'm like, well, what does that even mean? Is that just
Okay.
and how much can what's diluting of shares? Because
Right.
like
I
when you
mean,
start a
anybody that's
company,
seen the social network, right? The
yeah,
Facebook thing, they know about what is diluting shares because that's exactly what Zuckerberg did to his partner there, right? So
you
I
better
I
lawyer up, right? That's what he says to him. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I had the exact same questions, and I was a little bit like naive. I already knew I wanted the job because it sounded really exciting. So I didn't, but I could not understand what the value of these things were, because I'm giving up real cash money here. Like it's not like they're like giving me what I want for my pay and then going, oh, by the way, here's like appreciation options. Like we really want you to be invested in this company. So here's like options for free almost. Like it's not like that, right? I don't know if it's like that at other startups and this is just an exception or what. But anyways, I'm an adult. I can make decisions. It's not like they're pulling the wool over my head. I kind of looked at it and went like, I don't know what these things are valued at. So I just got to get enough money to like so my I can live. And if things don't work out, I can quit, right? I can go find another job. Um Now that was something you could say like 3 or 4 years ago. Now it's like, oh, I'll just quit and get another job. Well, I don't know if you've seen, but the tech sector is really in a weird place and you might not be able to just go out and get another job. But yeah, so to come back to your question, like, about all these things like pre-seed and all that, it comes down to like how are startups funded? And the way most startups are funded is through venture capital dollars. And a lot of times, like they'll start out where it's just like friends and family, or the founders themselves. Like the founders of this company had a successful exit at a different company, so they had money around to be able to pump into this new company. And in so you put in your money into the company, and what you get back are shares of the company, right? Equity into the company. So, and what when venture capitalists come in, and this is where you get into your seed rounds and that kind of thing, they get back shares, but they get back actually kind of like special shares, like not the shares that I would be able to get, but they get like special ones that kind of like hedge their risk because they are putting up like cash money, right?
So
So
what do you mean special shares? Like,
So they're putting up a big chunk of money. And then what they will do is they'll get what's called preferred shares. Now, what you and I would get would be options on common shares. Common shares are like just the standard share that that builds the equity in a company. And when I asked, some question, I didn't know about preferred shares or anything. Like I didn't know anything about anything until I got out of that company and had to decide, well, what do I do with these options that I've accrued, right? And we can talk about what that means. Like I was given like a stash of options, but I couldn't. You have to exercise an option before it's actually anything.
you gotta
Eh,
liquidate it, right? I take it if you want the cash or whatever. So
Pretty much, yeah. What so at the beginning I didn't know anything and I just went like, I don't know what these things are. They're telling me it's a lottery ticket and maybe it will, you know, it'll pay off, maybe it won't. Um and I kind of accepted that risk. And again, I'm an adult. I can take that risk. So then fast forward, you're working at a startup, you're working your butt off. I'm not even gonna like lie about that. And you get to the end of your time at the startup, whether that's you got laid off, you decided to leave, whatever it is. Um, the way that they give you these options, the way that they structure the compensation package, is they go, "We're giving you this many options, but you have to work 1 year before you can actually exercise a quarter of them." Okay. After 4 years, you can exercise all of them.
vested
Yeah. So
is the
that
term,
that
right? Yeah.
that 1 year thing is often called the cliff. What they want you to do, people, they like if you were to say to people, you gotta stay here 4 years and then you can vest all your options, they'd be like, I don't know, that's like a little risky. Like, what if you screw me over in the third year and I don't get anything, right? Instead, what they do is they go, okay, we're going to give you this many options, but after this certain cliff period, you'll get a portion of them, a big portion of them. Um, and when I say get, I just mean you have the option to exercise that into a share of the company. Okay.
So just to clarify, when you say options, do you mean actual share? Like,
It's the option to purchase the share at a very discounted value.
so right, I've seen this in movies, right? I'm not an expert, but you know when they say to someone, um, and they're saying, "I will guarantee you the price of a share at this rate if you come on board," right? And it's heavily discounted, but the actual market value of that share could be a lot higher depending on the way the company's evaluated, right, compared to market conditions, right, on the stock exchange and everything else. And
Absolutely.
okay, so have I got that right? And then there's obviously different private firms and then publicly trading firms, and
Well, it all
it's
comes down
different,
to
right?
they give you a price that you can purchase this option at, that it converts it into a share, exercising it. Well, what is the fair market value of a privately held company's share?
You can't tell, right? I
There's no
suppose.
market, right? So really what the fair market value comes down to is what is somebody willing to pay for that share, even though they can't buy it. Like I couldn't take my option, exercise it, and then go, "Hey Kevin, you want to buy my option for $5?" Like I can't do that because there's no market for us to do that in.
So do you have to sell it back to the company?
That's one option, but that's not something that is a given. They have to give you that ability to do that, right?
Okay.
So whereas where you're working for a publicly traded company, um, they might give you an option or they might give you something called RSUs, which are restricted stock units. So Um, an option or a restricted stock unit. I don't think you really see restricted stock units in like VC funded startups, but those are actually good options, right? Because I can go, okay, well, I have these options. They said I can buy them for $1. I'm looking at the Nasdaq here, and it says it's worth $10. So yeah, I'm probably going to exercise that option, and I'm going to get $9 a share because I had to pay the original one, and then I get $9 back. That
Make
seems
a
like
buck. You make
seems
a buck, right? Yeah,
a buck.
exactly.
Whereas with RSUs, they're like a grant, and they're called restricted because there's restrictions on them. They're giving you a pool of these RSUs, and then they're saying, okay, after 1 year you get this many, and after this much time you get this many, and oh, by the way, you can't transfer them. Like, you have to be an employee of the company. You can't. We're not going to let you like have these after you're an employee, kind of thing. So what ends up happening is when your RSU vests, you get an actual share in the company, and then you can turn around and take that share and sell it on the stock market. Like, you didn't have to pay anything for this. Like, they just gave it to you. Like, you just got the share. You didn't have a strike price on it. Nothing. Whatever the publicly traded value of that share is on the markets, you can turn around and go, I will take the money for that, please. Here, you can have the share that I just got vested. Um, and it all kind of, and it's, the thing is that you think, oh, that's great. And, but isn't the government going to want some of this? I mean, it seems like I just made some money here, right? And the answer is yes, they will.
Especially in Canada,
Yeah.
similar to the British system. Capital gains, I think, is where you're alluding to on this, right?
It's actually for an RSU or an option. You will get charged your personal like income tax bracket for that thing. Okay.
Because it's classified as an income, right?
It's almost like they just bonused you the money, right? Like, there was this transaction where you sold a share and that kind of thing. So the funny thing is that you're kind of like, you can kind of get taxed twice on this. So let's give the example of the RSU, because maybe you work for Microsoft and they did that, or Amazon or something like that, and they gave you RSUs. So they go and they say, hey, your vesting day was today. Here's your RSUs. And what will happen is the government will go, well, what was the well, I guess when you're doing your taxes, you're doing this, but you're like, well, what was the closing price of the stock on the market on that vesting day? I take that amount of money that I just made off of my RSUs, and I add that to my taxes, and go, well, it's almost like I just got bonus out this much money. Okay. So they're going to tax you personally. They're going to tax you on that amount of money. Now you might say, well, wait. I'm not actually going to sell my share when it gets vested. I'm going to hold it. Well, the government's like, that's fine, but the company just gave you something of value. We're going to tax you on that. If you go and sell it later and you make a profit, we're going to tax you on the capital gains that you made for that. Okay. Or maybe you lost and you'll get like a capital gains, credit or something like that. Right. So
Depending on
they'll
the
get you,
company, right?
yeah,
Yeah, totally.
they,
Yeah.
they get you going both ways. Right. And so, that's for RSUs. For options, it's, you know, if your option vests, you don't really have a share. You don't have a share until you actually exercise your option. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, when my option vests, is the government looking and going, well, what's the fair market value of that share? And I'm going to get taxed personally? Yeah, that is exactly what happens. The only saving grace here is if you're with a Canadian startup, there's a rule called it falls under the Canadian Controlled Private Corporation clause. So if the company that gave you the option and you just vested an option, if they gave it to you and you exercise that option, um, you don't actually have to pay taxes um, on that share that you just got, the value of that share, whatever that value might be, until there's a liquidation event of some sort. Because right now you got that share. Well, what are you going to do with it? You're going to print it out and hang it on your wall. But the government shouldn't be able to tax you for whatever the fair market value is of that share now. So it's not until there's like a liquidation event that you'll actually have to realize the tax on that. And it's really tricky though, Kevin, because you might be thinking, well, and this is another thing, like say, like when I was no longer with the company, I had a certain pool of my options that vested. And they gave me 1 year after my employment to be able to make a decision. Are you going to convert? Are you going to exercise these things into shares? Or are you just going to abandon them altogether? Right. That's where I really started going down the rabbit hole of like, what are the implications here of if I exercise these options? Because I was told that they're like lottery tickets. Well, if I buy a lottery ticket, I spend the dollar, which would be like the strike price on the option. And then if I don't win the lottery, I don't get a call from the CRA saying, "Well, you know what? The lottery went for $1 million, so that was the actual value of your lottery tickets. So we want to like tax you on that." They don't do that with options. They do. So if I go invest that share and the company says, we just did a Series C, and the investors that invested into our company valued our company at $1 billion, and we're giving you the share, and your share is actually worth we're giving you the share at $1, but the actual share is quote unquote worth $20. The government's going to be looking at that $19 and going, well, the company just gave you $19, right? They just gave you $19. You can't do anything with that share, but still, that was something of value. They're going to want to tax you. The CRA is going to want to tax you on that. And like I said, the saving grace is that if it's a Canadian controlled private company, that means that the shareholders, there's a certain amount of shareholders that are Canadians. They're not operating out of the US. It's all kind of Canadian based. Um, they'll give you some leeway and they'll say, well, that $19, we're not going to tax you on that until there's a liquidation event in the company where you can get rid of your shares. And so it brings you to, well, what is a liquidation event, right? Well, what would you think is a liquidation event for a startup?
Either it gets acquired, exits,
Hmm.
or actually collapses, right? So, but then once it collapses, the value, depending on what kind of situation it is, there's going to be complexities there, right? Because then you're going to pay creditors off. There's stages, right, for shutting down a company that has to be done in a correct fashion, right? I take it. So
Yeah,
what
it
happens?
can get really complicated. So let's go back to the thing where you had a strike price of $1. The company at the time that you got your option said, "Hey, it's worth $20." Um, and then you decide you're going to exercise your option. For me, like for instance, I'm not at the company anymore. I have to decide if I'm going to exercise this option or not. Okay, the company is telling me it's worth 20. I get it for $1. Um, the government's going to want tax on the $19 difference there. I won't have to pay that right away, but I'll have to pay the tax when the liquidation event happens. So let's say that they get acquired and it's an all cash deal, and they acquire the company for something north of $20 a share. Well, that's great. I only have to pay taxes on the $19 difference. Um, I'll probably have to pay a capital gains on anything above the $20 initial fair market valuation. That's fine. I'm still making money. It's all good. It's all good. But what if the company gets acquired for less than that amount?
Negative equity.
Yeah, like say they get acquired. I don't know. They hit hard times, and a company comes along and says, "We'll give you $15 a share, not 20." Well, unfortunately, you as the person that vested that option, you're still paying the tax on that as if it was a $20 stock. Okay. But then the government will turn around and go, "Oh, but you made a capital loss there. Like you made a loss on an investment. So we'll give you a capital gains loss, right?" Well, that's all fine and dandy, but you still have to pay that personal tax with money, with like actual like dollars, right? And then you can get this credit for like your loss, but the credit you can only apply that against like if you're in the stock market already and you had gains somewhere else. Like you invested into Microsoft and Microsoft's gone up 20% over the last 5 years, and instead of paying your capital gains on that gain, you can take that loss and apply it against that gain, and then you pay less taxes there. So, if you're in an early stage startup, they're not really paying you that well. I don't know what the chances are that you're in the stock market and, making all these gains everywhere, but it's not that great of an incentive. So that really was an eye opener. And the way that I found out about this was when I had to make a decision on whether or not I should exercise my share. I went to a corporate tax lawyer. Um, and I actually paid him a pretty decent amount. He's the guy that I use for my corporation. I explained everything to him, and he started teasing these things out. He goes, "Well, they're offering it. You have your strike price for X on your option. They're saying the company's worth this much. Um, so, when they have a liquidation event, you're going to have to pay this much tax." And it wasn't insignificant. And I said, "Okay, but if the company goes bankrupt, I guess all it's like a lottery ticket. Just go, oh no, no, no. You pay the money. It's at the time they gave you like something that was of value, and the government wants that money. They're just deferring it because it's a Canadian controlled private corporation. You'll get a capital gains loss though. Don't worry. Okay, well I don't have any like stocks, so what am I supposed to do with this capital gains loss? Yeah, I don't know." So
It's
all
like
of
a
this
catch.
was it was very jarring, and it was very much like I felt like I was learning something that like almost like a conspiracy theory type thing where nobody else knows this. I'm the only one that knows this. So I started talking to some of the people at this company and I said, "Do you know about this?" They're like, "What?" What are you talking about?" "Well, this is what my corporate tax lawyer told me, and I looked it up and it seems like it's all legit." Nobody had a clue. So, this all comes back to Um, you probably, when you got these options, if you're at an early stage startup, you probably gave up real money for them. So it's not like they're free, right? It is like buying lottery tickets and you're paying the dollar for the lottery ticket on the hopes that it's going to be worth something. But again, you don't get taxed on the lottery ticket if you don't win it. Actually, in Canada, you don't even get taxed on lottery winnings at all, which is completely bizarre because we tax everything else. But anyways, that's beside the point. Um, and so it's a big risk. And I don't think a lot of people know what the risks are. And I, th- unless the company that you're working at does end up continuing to do that hockey curve type of thing, and they end up getting bought out, or they go on the Nasdaq or something like that. Not only did you not really get anything for your options, but you probably might even owe some taxes if you decided to vest. If you didn't vest your options, that's fine. You just let them expire. You're not paying anything on those. Sorry, I rambled quite a bit there, Kevin.
Absolute gold. And, you know, my suggestion, this was all great advice. We are not financial experts, but I think Craig pointed out uh the obvious one there, is get a good accountant,
Yes.
basically. Which is easier said than done, to be quite honest, right? So try and find someone that's got the expertise, understands what's going on. It's better to know stuff up front than be surprised about it later, which sounds like it was you, Craig. Sounds like you've been on a journey, right? And it's a very complex system, right? And
It's very complex.
I feel like it's glamorized
Mhm.
a lot, right? Like, yeah, I got stocks, right? Like Wolf of Wall Street kind of thing. And then it's just like, but it's so incremental. There's so many different bits and pieces to it. It's very complicated for the average Joe, to be quite honest.
Yeah, it's and like I hearken back to when I initially asked them, "Hey, what would like what percentage of the company are you giving me here?" As far as like if my options were to all vest and I have a chunk of stocks, what percentage of the company is that? Because and they're, well, we can't really tell you that. Well, after I ended up out of that company and I was doing all this research, well, shoot, there's a government site where you can look up any corporation and find their corporate tax filings. And in there, it will go, there's this many common shares, there's this many preferred shares, there's this, blah, 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 blah. And here's who the directors are and stuff. So you can find out all this stuff. And I'll give you a link to that site that you can put in the show notes.
What's it called? Because in the UK, it's called Companies House, right? That's like a registrar of all of the companies, LTDs, right? That kind of
Yeah.
thing, right? What's it called in Canada?
The company's office would be more of a provincial thing. This one, it's the title of the site is literally called Corporate Document Search, right? I don't know if it's like an actual like what department it
It falls
lies
under,
under.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Because you guys have got like a federated system here, whereas back
yeah,
home,
yeah,
one department for the whole country, right? Kind of thing.
right,
So yeah, okay, that makes sense.
yeah. And so, like you had brought up dilution, right? So, well, what is that exactly, right?
Yeah, what is
What
it?
it sounds like another risk, and it is. Because you're getting these common shares. These are the shares that all of your fellow employees are going to get, and maybe even the founders. They have common shares. Like, I think a lot of founders, they'll issue themselves common shares because it looks really good to the other investors, like the VC guys. Like they're like the VCs might get like a little bit like leery of if the founders have a bunch of preferred shares, because what preferred shares give you is almost like a guarantee on return if in certain cases. So it's kind of like you're part of the employees, so you should be compensated the same way. But the problem is that if the founders are also the directors of the company with the board and that kind of thing, well, they can decide, well, we're going to issue more common shares. We're going to dilute everybody. So, like for instance, say there's 100 shares in the company, and they decide, well, you know what, we need 110 shares because we got to do a hiring spree and we want to give out more shares to more employees. That means that, well, you as an existing employee, the share pool just increased by 10%. So that diluted you, right? That diluted you because you used to have share one of 100. Now you got share one of 110. And then what I'm not saying the founders will do this or anything like that, but like what the founders can do is like, we don't really want to get diluted. So of those extra shares, let's make sure that we set aside some for ourselves to compensate ourselves so that we kind of bring ourselves above water again. Right. So they can,
Protective, like yeah, okay.
yeah. And then the other way that you can get diluted is, let's say they do another funding round, right? So they do another funding round. Um, they get like $100 million. You got to issue shares to those people that just bought in for $100 million, and that's just like I'm just using 100 million as like you know. I think back like maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, 100 million. Oh my God, that's amazing. That's like the most money I've ever heard of in my life. That's like nothing these days. Like these companies, like these AI companies are getting like a billion, 500 million, that kind of thing. But what will happen is that these these investors will get a special class of share called a preferred share. Um, the reason they're called preferred shares is there's a set of preferences that they get. Um, Now, what are some of the preferences? Well, say there is a liquidation event. One of the preferences on a preferred share might be called ranking, and it means that I get paid before you get paid. Okay, so the common shares are sitting there. They should be, say there's a liquidation event where a company comes and says, I'm going to give you this much money for your company. You would take that amount, you'd divide it by all the common shares, and go, okay, well, everybody gets X number of dollars per share now. Yay. But with ranking, what happens is there's kind of like ranking kind of I think goes along with this thing called participation, where the the preferred shareholder, there's usually a clause in the documents that they sign that say, um, worst case scenario, we want to get back, say, our money back, right? So if there is a sale, we want the option to be able to get our money back, because maybe the sale wouldn't be enough to like pay out all the investors and everything, but we have preferred shares, so we at least want our money back. So what would happen is like the company would get this big chunk of money. The preferred shareholders would go, okay, well, we want this much of that money because that will give us our money back. And then the rest that's left over, that gets that gets divided up between creditors and common shareholders and that kind of thing. So it's kind of like they get paid first. The other thing that they can enjoy as far as a preference, and this isn't for everything, like these are just different types of preferences, but they can say, well, you know what? Um, if the company gets bought for like a lot of money, we don't just want our money back. We want to participate in that, in the common shares now. So we want to be able to convert our preferred shares to common shares at some ratio, maybe like 2 to 1 or 3 to 1 or 1 to 1 or some ratio. And we're gonna participate in that carve up of that money, because that carve up, because of the amount of shares we have, is going to be a lot more than what we invested. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's this is very complicated, right?
It is. It is. And then there's the last one I'll just mention is they usually have anti dilution um, clauses in there. And what that means is new investors come in Series B, Series C, Series D, and the guys in Series A are going, well, we don't want to be diluted because somebody put in, we put in $10 million, somebody put in $100 million.
Totally.
So what ends up happening is there's this big adjustment, and the preferred shares that the guys that entered in early, they'll get more of them. So they kind of like convert at a rate, like they get a more of their preferred shares to avoid getting diluted by the newcomers. Okay. All of this dilutes you as a common shareholder, by the way, like the employee and stuff. So, it's really the people that actually have the skin in the game. They're the ones that have the protections. And then what is the other way that you can be diluted? Well, I kind of alluded to it. The directors can kind of just go, we're printing more common shares. There's more common shares in the company now.
Quantitative easing, right? Kind of
Yes. Yep.
strategy, right?
Yeah. And the companies that, like, if you look up I looked up a few because there was a few people that kind of reached out to me and said, hey, I'm part of a startup. Like, how many common shares are even in my startup? So I looked on the corporate document search, and it was a mixture between companies that go, there's a fixed amount of common shares right at this time that are in the company, in the pool. But then there's a few that go, there's no fixed amount, it's unlimited. So they can literally just issue as much shares as they want without having to even tell anybody about it, really, and just dilute the hell out of everybody. Hopefully they're not doing that maliciously, but it's one of those things where, like, if you're being compensated in this way, you should at least know what the amount is, right? What are these things valued at? What could they potentially be valued?
Totally. I Something, the voice inside me tells me that if you're like a partner or a founder, you're in a better position rather than an employee because you know actually what's going on, right? From a leadership point of view and how the financial controls are in place, right? Or how even the company's structured, right? So I don't know, man. I'm a bit old fashioned. I'm more of a tell how much money I'm going to be taking home every month, right? Kind of
Mm-hmm.
guy.
Mm-hmm.
But I do see this thing is becoming on the rise, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm starting to see a lot of, right? Is well, we'll give you stake in the company. But to your point, like, do I get a control and share? Like, where am I in the pecking order? How does this work?
We
Right?
didn't
They're
even
uncomfortable questions, right? But they need to be asked, right?
we didn't even get into common like voting shares versus non-voting shares as well. Usually the founders have voting shares. Um, the VC uh, the VCs have some portion of voting shares, right? They can vote on things. You as a common shareholder, you don't have a vote, right?
So,
So and
so
you don't I don't even know if you have like say if I were to vet like I have these options, they have vested so I can exercise them and I can turn them into a share. Do I have any like in a private company, do I even have any rights? Like can I then reach out to corporate relations and say, "Hey, I'm a shareholder now. Show me your profits and losses."
that's it as well. Also, you've got shareholders, but then you've got the senior leadership team, right? So they're in charge of the day-to-day operations of the business, right? CEO, CFO, CTO, right? Chief operations officer. They're actually in charge of the business. But let's just say there's somebody who's got 50% of the shares of the company. Does that mean they've got a seat at the table as well on the direction that the business is going, that kind of thing?
Only if they're voting shares. Yeah.
So if they've got like say 50% of the vote in shares,
Mhm. They control
they've
the
got
company.
they essentially they've got a bigger decision-making power than those 4 executive office positions that I've just talked about, right?
They actually have all the power because it doesn't matter what those other officers can vote at. The other one just goes, "Well, I have 51%, so we're gonna do it my way." Right? So, and you gotta be careful because one of the provisions for a Canadian-controlled private corporation, which gives you that kinda tax deferral, is that the company has to be run by Canadians. So if you get a lot of VC activity and they're getting lots of voting shares, you got to make sure that the company's still actually controlled by the Canadian founders and not by the American VCs or the Chinese VCs or whatever it's going to be, right? But the good news is that if you already had your options and it was a Canadian controlled private corporation, those options are fine and they're protected and you're going to get that deferral of your taxes. Anything after the company turns into a non-Canadian controlled private corporations, it's those options where if you were to exercise them, the government would want their money immediately. Just another little aside there.
I feel like this has been absolutely fascinating, Craig.
Right.
I'm just conscious of time. I feel
Yeah.
like we've gone down so many rabbit holes, but I've learned a lot, right? But I mean, you're a developer, dude. You've literally gone down an ADHD rabbit hole with
I
this, right?
think
To
so.
figure it all, right? Um,
It just drove me nuts that I couldn't figure out how much the option or the share was worth. And
I
I had to educate myself on what is it worth? And again,
totally,
I'm not a financial guy and like any advice that I just gave, you should actually vet it through a corporate tax lawyer. But this is just something I did and it based my decision on whether I should exercise options or not.
totally. That's probably the best advice. Get yourself a good accountant to figure it out. Interview your accountants. I do that. I've done that recently, right? Depending on what you're doing and everything, because every one of them is going to tell you, yeah, we can help, right? Like, that's just the way it is. But you know, they're effectively like a financial lawyer as well, right? So you got to figure that out. Like, if something does happen with the bank or the tax revenue service in your country, right? You need someone to be able to handle that on your behalf, right? It's complicated, right? We're talking about tax systems that have been around for hundreds of years,
Absolutely. And
right?
it's complicated. It is complicated. And, to your point of getting a good one, it's hard to get away from, say you ended up with a bad one. It's kind of hard to strip yourself away from that, right? Because you got to get all your books back. You got to find out how is your corporation structured and all that kind of stuff. And they know all that stuff. So Yeah, you should definitely like I always use referrals. Like I reach out to other people and ask them, hey, what's your experience with this guy? And yeah, I go from there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, Craig, it's been a pleasure. Where is it? Where's the best place for people to find you, connect with you, see
Oh,
what Craig's
geez.
doing?
I used to be active on Twitter, now X, maybe there. Krieger, it's Craiger. If you want to hit me up there, I check it in every once in a while. Otherwise, yeah, what the heck? I guess I'm just chatting with LLMs these days. I don't think you can get in there though.
I don't know, like feel like Claude's my best friend these days, right? With the conversations that I have. But yeah, we'll include it in the show notes, maybe potentially LinkedIn, that kind of thing. But
I guess that would be a good place is LinkedIn, and I'll give you that corporate document search site as well. Yeah.
so I know this one was a bit different. Normally we go into some tech topics, but I feel like it's really important because I feel like these scenarios are coming closer together, right, in the tech industry, right, and where people work and everything. But yeah, thank you very much for coming on. Again, we want to continue the conversation, jump on our Discord, right? You can find us at connect.code2cloud.io. And I've been your host, Kevin Evans. And don't forget to like, repeat, share, right?
Can I say one
So
more thing, Kevin?
go for it,
Sorry,
Craig.
I didn't mean to interrupt your flow there, but um, I don't want to come across as being anti-startup because they are important. Like you need entrepreneurs in your country. You need them to build like cool places where people can work and benefit. Their ideas are actually going to benefit things. So I didn't want to come across as that. So hopefully,
No, no,
okay,
do you know what? We need it, but it's very risky as well. But I feel like it's going to become the norm because these big corporations, they're not stable either,
no,
right?
no,
So it's just a different, it's just it's breaking the norms, right?
for sure,
And the more information you have and the more knowledge you have, the more you're armed to deal with these situations, right? So
absolutely.
totally.
All right,
I
take care.
catch you all later on the next one.
Alrighty, see ya.